Anyway, I'm delighted to see such a geographical variation here. This is good stuff. We're all the way from Saskatchewan and Theodore, so welcome everybody. My name is Elaine Hughes. I live just outside Archwell on a little farm that my grandparents homesteaded a few years ago, 70 years ago, I guess. Anyway, I'm the chairperson for the Quill Plains chapter, and I'm delighted to introduce Jessica Ernst to you. Jessica and I have known each other for a few years. We met at a meeting in Craig on the nuclear issue, so there's never a shortage of things to talk about or try and understand. I'm terrible at remembering things, so I have to use my notes. Jessica is an environmental scientist with 30 years of oil patch experience, and she's here to tell us about fracking in her community and her fight to bring the many issues associated with drilling and fracking to the public. And this is our biggest challenge. If people know about it, they've either been told to shut their mouth or paid to shut their mouth. So we're fighting opposition in many directions, and it's public awareness and education that makes all the difference in the world. We all need our drinking water, and Jessica's going to expound on that. And because her well was poisoned by unnatural and dangerous concentration of methane gas and other industrial toxins, and because EnCana refuses to disclose the chemicals injected in the community's drinking water supply, she must now haul her water. She wasn't expecting to do that. She also had to buy a truck. She wasn't expecting to do that either. Some time ago, Jessica filed legal action against EnCana, the Energy Resources Conservation Board of Alberta, which approves energy projects in Alberta, and the Alberta government for their responsibility. In May, I'm just so proud of this girl. In May, she went to give a presentation to the United Nations and made a big splash there. And I spread it around even further, so this is great. She has since spoken to many groups, Maritimes in Alberta. We're getting her warmed up just for the Saskatchewan round of stops. So I hope you can take good news back to your community and get the word out when the next time she shows up in Saskatchewan, you can tell your friends that this gal's got an interesting story. And on October the 1st, actually, EnCana, I don't know, United Nations something international, a UN Economic and Social Council, NGO, non-governmental organization, presented Jessica with its annual Woman of Courage Award in New York at the Church Center of United Nations. My friend, we're so happy you're here, Jessica. Come on up.
It's hard enough to do these presentations without all these introductions. All right, well, I'm going to give you an offer. I can do with a smaller group. I often like to give you the decision. I can do a formal presentation, or I can open it up to the Q&A during the presentation. I'm quite good at being interrupted, so it's up to you. I'm going to let you choose. Do you want to ask questions as I go, when they're fresh in your mind? Do you want to wait till the end? Wait till the end. Wait till the end? Anybody else? Okay, if you do decide you want to interrupt, go right ahead, all right? So I'm going to start with, there's a hole in their story. Why would I pick such a strange title? Well, number one, there's a lot of holes in their story. Lots of lies. Lots and lots and lots of lies. And there's also many other holes. One of the holes is when they drill. Here's my water well that's already dangerously contaminated. This photo was taken, they were drilling under my land October, November, just last year. And will not disclose to me what acid gases the regulator has given them approval to inject, and they will not disclose to me what chemicals. They also did more other wells around me. This, one of the first things I'm going to do, or through this presentation, I want to tell you what I'm going to tell you, because it's an intense presentation. You've all driven a long way. I'm going to throw an incredible amount of data at you. The laws and regulations that they promise us, one of the holes in their story, is that they will protect you, your community, your water from hydraulic fracturing. The new hydraulic fracturing. It won't. The law won't. The regulations won't. We have the best in the world in Alberta. So that's what I'm going to tell you today. Today in the Edmonton Journal, just before I left this morning, somebody from Alberta, in rural Alberta, sent me an email And there's an article today in the paper, they're now moving into super fracking to go deeper and further and more. And they don't even know what their brute force fracking is doing. Does anyone here not know what fracking is? You all have heard a little bit about it. You don't know what fracking is? You don't know? Okay. What they're doing is we're out of the good stuff. The conventional oil and gas is gone. There's a little bit left. We're running out really fast. Now I think the governments are too afraid to tell us because there would probably be mass panic and people would get very angry. Well, why are we continuing to put billions of dollars in subsidies into oil and gas? We need to be putting them into something different. Fracking is when they drill down either shallow, as in up over there. I guess I better use this. Here's a shallow coal bed methane well. Here's a deep shale well. I'm going to use the wall. That's a deep shale. Here's a waste disposal well. These are the wells that are causing the earthquakes you're hearing around the world in the fracking fields, England, many places in the States. They're now fracking all the mansions that belong to the CEOs just northwest of Calgary. I think it's an incredible tit for tat. These guys are getting massive damages in their foundations to $6, $5, $2 million homes. People are laughing, yeah. Yeah, and the ERCB, our regulators, doing nothing. In other parts of the world, they're stopping the fracking because it's the waste injection they're finding they produce a lot of waste with fracking. So what they have to do, the conventional wells, they used to drill down, shallow or deep, they used to be deeper. They would hit a pool of a resource, gas or oil. The good stuff's gone. So now what they have to do is they have to shatter formations underground to force the tight oil and gas to let go. They call it tight because it is tightly absorbed to the formation, either the coal, or the shales. That's fracking. They use a lot of water. In some cases, they don't use any water. They're learning that actually in some formations, using water causes incredible formation damage and quite a slew of chemicals. The fracking is just one part of the process. I don't talk that much specifically just about fracking. I'm talking about the whole hole, the energy well. They're drilling a hole through the aquifers. There's where we get our drinking water from. This is also drinking water. And you can't see it because of the great windows here, but where the dotted line is, it says base of groundwater protection. This diagram is by the energy regulator. They came out with this little propaganda brochure because a community where the rich people live in the northwest of Calgary that was being fracked for tight oil demanded a moratorium because of the earthquakes and other problems. And they're still telling the public that they're only fracking below the basic groundwater protection. They're not. In my community, EnCana fracked directly into where we get our water from. I believe they did this in other communities. I haven't had the time to dig the data. And I've seen the data, hundreds, if not thousands of wells are being fractured above the basic groundwater protection. Here too. I've seen industry reports that have said they are planning to frack the shales between 300 and 700 meters and deep. That's one of their holes in their story. Oh, they told us too at Rosebud. Every community where the water has gone bad, oh, no, you don't have to worry. Go home. Go watch your curling. What are you doing here? We're only going to be way, way below your drinking water supply. You have nothing to worry about. And, we're going to give you a bonus. We have casing. Well, casing, this is steel. We used to make good steel in Canada. Now they get it from China. Lots of problems with the steel. Cement. They're using cheaper and cheaper cement. The other they tell us the casing is going to protect the groundwater for these holes, but they're putting explosions through the casing so that they can frack their water and chemicals into formation. And they're repeatedly perforating. Those explosions are called perforating holes in the casing. So more holes in the story. The other part about the holes in the story, the unconventionals, because the conventionals have run out, come with an unprecedented density of holes, oil and gas. And the super fracking, whoa. So that's a brief. I'm going to introduce to you a few players. EnCana split off to become EnCana and Cenovus. They use this to their convenience in many communities where water has gone bad. If it was EnCana that was doing the drilling, then Cenovus does the donations and or puts on the water conferences and vice versa. Many communities are noticing that. Our energy regulator in Alberta, the acronym is the ERCB, Energy Resources Conservation Board. They used to be the EUB, the Energy Utilities Board. I talk about both through the presentation because the story covers many years, and they were the EUB originally, until they were caught spying on Albertans and breaking the law. So the government changed their name. That way Albertans will forget and vote for the Tories again.
We might add that Jim and I were two of the people that were spied on.
But were you spied on? Wow, that's fantastic. You must be doing really good work. A round of applause, that's great. Yeah. Did you notice them eating all the cookies? How they found out that they were spying on the citizens, and they listened in on citizen lawyer phone calls, which is not supposed to be allowed. That's where you guys were. So you weren't in the meeting where how they caught them spying in the meetings on the little grannies would go to these meetings. They're concerned about their children, even though they don't have children many. They brought cookies. And the ex-RCMP that were now the new private eyes were eating all the cookies. So one of the organizers of some of the opposing groups said, hey, how come he's eating all the cookies? Well, thank you for being here. That's great. Our water regulator in Alberta used to be Alberta Environmental Protection. Then they changed the name to Alberta Environment. And when Redford just won, she's now changed the name to Alberta Environment and Water, which is really stupid because water is part of the environment. I think this is just a PR thing because water is everywhere in the news right now. Drought, we're running out, we're polluting it everywhere. Most of my story is about Alberta environment, but they're all sort of involved legally because I'm doing a legal case. They now are Alberta Environment and Water. I'm really sorry to give you this presentation. It's not my fault. It's the government's, it's the regulators, and industry's fault because of all these name changes and all this data. It's their stuff, it's not mine. And we have another name change, the Alberta Research Council. You have your Saskatchewan Research Council. They had a website. When they used to be the Research Council, they said they were meeting the priorities of industry. And they became, after I went public with their shoddy work in our investigations at Rosebud, they changed names to Alberta Innovates Technology Futures. I have the EnCana logo there. I like how it dances between the two because VP Gerard Prati was appointed to the board of the Research Council by order of council. You'll find out how interesting and smelly that is later on. I'm going to start with history. I am a bit of a scattered thinker, and I'm a scientist that has been mainly studying cumulative effects. For me, to go and tell a story chronologically goes against everything I've been taught, but I've been told it's easier on the human brain. So I'm struggling here, hopefully to make it easier for you. History. There were historic records on our water wells. Gas present? No. Patterson wells across the river, a neighbor of mine. I chose a well on the other side of the river, mine, plus a county well in the same quarter section of land where my well is. Gas present? No. Where it says gas present no is right there, 1986. For the legal case, we retained a hydrogeologist. He looked at 2,300 historic water well records before the experimental, very shallow and risky coal bed methane fractures began. 0.17% noted a gas present that could be methane. They're now saying all water wells are naturally contaminated with methane, especially if it's in coal. How bad you are that you drilled a water well into coal. Coal purifies water. Coal is a great place to get your water from, but, well. Saskatchewan, study done. Was reported in 86. In 1976, they gathered the data, 939 water wells in springs, and they found methane concentrations in the water were highest where the petroleum industry drill hole density increased. This is before the new brute force fracking, and now the super fracking. The ones that they did find methane in some of the samples. 95% had far less than 0.3%. 3 milligrams per liter. If you can remember that, I'll try to remind you later on. Try to remember that. One of the holes in the story is that industry, the EPA, the regulators all around the world have said there has never been a documented case of hydraulic fracturing contaminating well water or groundwater. Never. Go home. You don't have to be worried. We're going to take care of everything for you. Last summer, one of the environmental working group in the States exposed, it's a 100 megabyte document, it's on the internet. The EPA, which is the American Environmental Protection Agency, had documented a case. Very well documented. And Ian Urbina with the New York Times then looked deeper into it, and he found hundreds of other cases sealed with confidentiality agreements, maybe a little bit of money. I'm shocked how cheaply people sell out for. They're afraid. I have understanding for it and compassion for it. I don't like doing what I'm doing. I do not like what my life has become. It's really scary. It's really hard. Very hard. So it's very easy to take the money and run. I have compassion for that. Southern Manitoba. Numerous energy wells. This is peer-reviewed, published data. Hydraulic fractures in several energy wells propagated into the underlying water zones. Another hole in their story is they tell us they know what they're doing and that they can control their fracks. They can't. That's why laws and regulations don't do you any good. If they adhere them and if they enforce them. 1993, Husky did some studies because gas migration was such a serious problem. Alberta and Saskatchewan was the area they looked at. Not all of it. There was an area around Lloydminster. And they concluded, big problem. Expensive to fix. What does the oil patch not like to do? They don't like to spend money on us. Your children? No. It's supposed to go to the shareholders. And difficult to completely stop. The photo is my community. These signs are popping up like a virus, like bacteria on the soup you forgot to put in the fridge. Unprecedented number of holes are being drilled and then perforated and then fracked. Before the brute force fracking, Husky found 46% of their wells tested had gas migration. Does anyone need to know what gas migration is? Okay, sorry. Yeah, gas migration is when they are, the first slide that I showed you of the formations underground, when they drill an oil well, there's often natural gas leaking to surface, even though it's an oil well. And what they found in Husky's research, and the regulators were involved in this as well, bacteria eat oil and produce methane. And this methane was leaking. I'll tell you a little bit more about gas migration later on, where some of the migration is coming from. So this gas migrates up the wellbore and then can migrate into drinking water aquifers. It can also migrate, I will show a variety of ways that gas will migrate with a diagram later on, but it can also migrate to surface. So migrant, they also call it fugitive gas, rogue gas. It's gas that's going where it wants to go, not where us humans want it to go. So does that kind of, you'll probably get more of a sense of what gas migration is as I go along. Has anyone here seen the movie Gasland or heard about it? Oh, quite a lot. Okay. You know how they're attacking Josh Fox? They're trying to discredit him. He was the director. It's a great movie. You can see it on, you can get trailer on the internet. HBO, I believe you can see it. It aired in Canada. It aired in America. But the attacks on Josh have been incredible. And because I know what the attacks on me have been like, I go, wow, bravo, Josh must have really done a good job with that movie, because they don't bother wasting time and money attacking and discrediting anybody if they don't have to. What they're doing to try to discredit him is they're saying, oh, nature did it. Everywhere where the water contamination is happening, they keep saying there's never been a documented case. The water has always been contaminated with methane. It's biogenic methane. Biogenic is shallow. The deep, where they used to target from is the thermogenic. But they're both natural gas. That's why they call it natural gas. And one of the big lies I find in this war is that when they say it's your problem and it's nature's problem because it's biogenic gas in your water, they're fracking for biogenic gas. We're pretty well out of the conventional thermogenic stuff, other than the deep shales now. That first diagram I showed, some people came in late. I showed a diagram earlier on, and they're fracking above the basic groundwater protection and just below it. That's where the biogenic gas is. So when I went down to New York in the fall, I decided to reread a bunch of research I had found over the years. When I first went public, they didn't blame nature the way they are now. And I first went public many years ago, and I began paying attention, of course, to all the other cases, especially where EnCana is operating. Contaminated water seems to follow EnCana around. And I read the Husky report again, and I looked at this quote. Did it ever hit me? Could some part of the problem be attributable to natural sources? Now remember, the thermogenic is natural, the biogenic is natural, the shallow, the deep, it's all natural gas. What's not natural are the holes, and then the perforations and the fractures into both the shallow and the deep sources of oil and or gas. So they found, because of their oil wells, they were finding a lot of natural gas migrating up their oil wells, and they can fingerprint the depth at which gases come from. Same as they can fingerprint a bank robber and then look at the fingerprints in the bank vault and get a match. They can do that with the different gases, methane, ethane, propane, butane. And they were finding with the oil wells, biogenic gas was coming up, leaking up their wells. So they thought, we think that the biogenic swamp gas, the shallow gas that they're discrediting Josh Fox with, is actually using the energy wells to leak up. So industries...
Is this like some wells blow? Why they catch on fire?
No, that's a whole different thing. No, the gas migrating usually is at fairly low levels, but it's chronic over time. You get more and more of it. The scary thing with the fracking, of course, is now you're using brute force to shatter the formation. I'm not a blowout expert, but I would think some of the really big blowouts we're seeing, I'll show you one later on, they're either hitting high pressure pockets of gas they weren't expecting at shallow areas, or before they were expecting to hit something, or they make mistakes. I mean, they're drilling into gas, right? And there's a lot of gas associated with oil. So are they causing the biogenic swamp gas into those contaminated water cases everywhere that they're blaming nature on? I think this is one of the most important questions that I started to really think about. When did they decide to blame nature for industry's gas migration? What did Husky say in their conclusions? Expensive to fix. They knew that we were running out. They knew the fracking was coming. So you have to find somebody else to blame. Chafin, 1994, U.S. Geological Survey. We hardly ever hear about this study. This is an incredibly important study. Put in the back closet. He was put in the back closet. He got into a lot of trouble for reporting the way he did, honestly. He didn't find vertical migration of methane by natural processes. One of his conclusions, the gas well annuli, the holes, are more important than natural fractures for the upward migration of gas. Well, if you think about it from common sense viewpoint, it makes sense, right? But this is industry. This is using data and industry's data and science. Again, the photos are my community, 34 wells there. Chafin's conclusion, another one, man-made migration pathways probably introduced most near-surface gas to the study area. We don't ever hear about his study in the news when they say it's perfectly safe. And our big Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, which the big multinationals are members of, they came out with a big study. The reports are about like this thick, a number of years worth. The Saskatchewan Research Council did the work with the regulators in Alberta. They even titled their report, Migration of Methane into Groundwater from Leaking Production Wells. We don't hear them admit this anymore. I legitimately got a copy of this. I found it on the internet and the title of it and paid for it and asked for it, and they mailed it to me. There's the cover. And in this study, they did some interesting things. They did what the hydrogeologists did for my legal case, but they have way more money than I do. They looked at 24,000 historic records by the Alberta Water Regulator. At the time, it was Alberta Environmental Protection. The ones before they did any oil and gas drilling, 0.0% had a gas present that could have been methane. And after drilling began, but the conventional drilling, not the brute force fracking, unconventional drilling, 0.17%. That's the same amount we got at our study when we looked at it. There's the data there. They also said that methane in water wells on the Alberta side proved useful data on dissolved methane in groundwater is used in the region. They admitted that quantifying how much methane is dissolved in the water is important. They did find methane in most of the water wells, but less than 0.05 milligrams per liter. The Saskatchewan study a decade earlier, less than 0.3 milligrams per liter. The two highest in water wells were just over 1 milligram. They also said that dissolved methane may spread into aquifers as well as free gas above the water. So there's two ways that the gas can migrate into water and then come up into your water well. Here's a diagram showing how. I hope I don't jump ahead. Here's through the casing, another one through the surface casing, and there's dotted lines, you can't see them that well, and then outside the well. When they drill, they cause a lot of damage to formation, especially when they're perforating and fracking. The high pressure fracks, there's a lot of experts in the States and in Canada that are very concerned that the casing cannot withstand the pressure from these new fracks. So little holes form and the gas migrates. So that's the 90s. They knew at the time that methane was increased in water near leaking energy wells. So we have another decade now, and now they're confirming what Husky said a few years earlier. 19.1 milligrams per liter was the highest level that I could see in their study. And that's near a leaking energy well. I bought my place in 1998 at Rosebud. I came to move to Saskatchewan because the greed in the early 2003-04 was driving me out of Alberta. I loved the contentment here, the sense of community, the clean air, and but when I began to dig and find out what was happening, I realized I couldn't move here because how can I have done a 25-year career and then abandon Albertans? So I'm trapped there. I don't want to be there. I want to be here, although we're going to frack here too. I love beauty. I love the big sky. That's my garden. Hutchinson, Kansas, 2001. First responders couldn't figure out how to put this fire out. After these explosions damaged a number of businesses, raging fires, more explosions happened in the neighboring community 3 miles away, or 3 kilometers. Don't quote me on that. 3 or, I forget now. I think it was 3 miles, killing 2 people. It's the water. That's 2001. 2002, Trican is a big frack company, and Husky joined together, did some research. 12 to 80% of the wells they looked at are leaking. Methane is a worse greenhouse gas than CO2. Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. Does anyone here know who these guys are? They are our ministers of the environment, our corrupt politicians. I'm sorry, the politicians have really blown it. I can't. One of the things that's coming with the unconventional developments is never mind unprecedented level of development and drilling, unprecedented corruption. I'm shocked at what I'm seeing because I think they're so struggling to hide the truth. So they had this big workshop, 2002, Our regulators, Alberta Environment, Saskatchewan, they were all there. And they said, little is known about the integrity of concrete, seals, and steel. They promise us those are going to protect our water. But they don't know about 600,000 abandoned energy wells in the country. They also said industry's future impact on our water could be immense. Unconventional natural gas drilling poses a real threat. They did not say maybe, possible, and that we need baseline hydrogeological investigations to track the contaminants. They didn't bother. They did nothing. Did they tell you? They didn't tell me. And EnCana didn't care. The year before, EnCana was already using my community as a test tube. I'm going to throw some data at you. EnCana, this unprecedented amount of drilling, they were putting in the holes so fast and furious they couldn't even take the time to put a proper sign. They have to put the legals of all their wells, because if there is a blowout, and emergency responders need to know where to get. Do you guys know how legals work? Legal land descriptions? Like each rural piece of property has. If you're rural, like I can find, if you give me your legal anywhere in Saskatchewan or Alberta, I can drive there without a map. It takes a bit of work. It's like an address, but it's rural. And industry uses it, the regulators use it. Well, these were gas wells experimented and fractured above the base of groundwater protection. That first diagram I showed you, above the base of groundwater protection. In 2001, 2002, they doubled it up. I mean, there's almost, what is that? You add that up, it's like 150, 60. Shallow experiments. They didn't tell us. They did not give us a chance to protect, not even the pregnant women and children or our water. Had I known, I would have said to EnCana, whoa, we got to do baseline monitoring. You drill some government monitoring wells. You guarantee us in writing that if you put gas into our water, fracking, the purpose of fracking is to force the gas to let go. It doesn't want to let go by nature. Gwyn Morgan was the EnCana CEO at the time. Now you probably can't see that all too well. It's a little confusing, but it's not really. Now I'm showing you the wells that they fractured above 200 meters. That's insane. In 2001, they perforated at 100 meters into the fresh water. The next year, they did 3, 28 in 2004 with repeat fractures right into our drinking water supply. They didn't tell us. I was working for EnCana as a consultant at the time. They didn't even tell me. I get furious when I see this slide. 21 more in 2005. They did over 60. These are nasty experiments. Children and pregnant women, myself, my neighbors, we were test tubes. Secret frack test tube. The flaming water hit the front page of the news, 2005, end of the year in December. Whoa, a few weeks later, I guess a little bit of time out for Christmas, they terminated the experiment. They don't like bad press. That's why they hand out the money and the confidentiality agreements. They do not like bad press. Rosebud Water on the cover of Alberta Views magazine. Mr. Morgan steps down. Why would he do that? And then in 2010, they perforated again, really shallow. Mr. Morgan's appointed to the Order of Canada. I don't know what it is. In 2006, you guys all know that EnCana was going to appoint him to be head of the Accountability Act that Harper promised to bring in to show accountability in the government. Would you want a man like this who leads these type of experiments in a community to be head of accountability? And the opposition voted him down because of some pretty scary comments he had made about Jamaicans and numerous other things. And both Harper and Gwyn Morgan had little hissy fits and canceled the whole promise of accountability. Gwyn Morgan would have been in charge of the National Energy Board. They knew the unconventional oil and gas was coming, right? It was already happening.
Probably a ploy to make sure it was canceled.
No, I don't think so. I thought about that. Others have too. It's a very good idea. I actually think they wanted someone like Gwyn Morgan to have that kind of power. He's now Christy Clark, Premier of BC. I call her Christy Morgan. Yeah, well, that's what I call her. It's her nickname. He's her advisor, Gwyn Morgan. They're fracking the heck out of BC. You know where all the people in Vancouver go retire? Kelowna and everywhere, where all those beautiful properties are, orchards. EnCana's bought up the whole massive lands there. They're going to frack it all.
The natives let them in.
What can they do up in the north? They don't tell you. Then when they have gone to, then they've spent how many millions of dollars setting up a field? They don't tell you. This they don't tell you until it's too late.
Robert Louie's one of the chiefs of Kelowna.
Yeah, but this hasn't gone public yet, right? I just know that they've bought up lands.
Wow.
So, yeah. My life with fracking began with noise. A lot of noise. Now, at this time, I'm going a little bit of future with that data and Gwyn Morgan. We've gone from 2010 and 11 back to 2003. I didn't know any of that stuff that I just told you, right? I didn't know about the experiments, but I was living with a lot of noise. They continue to violate my legal right of a quiet enjoyment. It's not constant. It comes and goes. Depends on the weather. And my neighbor came to me and said, hey, Jess, my water well went bad after EnCana did a bunch of wells. I found out many years later they were terribly shallow. But his water well went bad. And he said, EnCana wants to drill more wells. You better get your well tested. Lucky for me, I did. EnCana came. The water appearance was clear. The tester did not report gas in the water. I have those data. There they are. Can't read them. It says it halfway down the page. I'm a scientist. I always have to have supporting evidence. At that time, the Research Council put out a report that said natural methane release from coal formations in Alberta is rare. Nature doesn't do it. Nature doesn't make it release. Yes, there is natural methane in water wells. Yes, bacteria can make methane. Yes, there can be natural migration of methane, but you saw the historic data, very low levels. Because the reservoirs are tight, the methane holds on. Brute force. They need massive trucks to force the methane to let go. 2003, casing expert in Canada, Maurice Dussault, he's written some incredible reports. Leaking methane gas from thousands of resource wells posed massive environmental problems. Massive. Escaping methane changes the water, generates aquifer problems. Coleman, back to the Hutchinson explosion that killed 2 people. Nobody knew what the hell had happened to them. They found out after an incredible investigation, not like the shoddy crap that we got in Alberta for our contaminated water, leaking gas from an energy well almost 7 miles away, migrated underground. 2004, this is EnCana's fracking directly into our drinking water supply. This is the data. There are holes in their story. Many, many, many holes. This long list, except for the very bottom, those are the perforations on 1 CBM well. 1. They've blasted through the casing. They promise us will prevent gas migrating. This is shallow. The most shallow was at 121 meters below the surface. How can that casing protect your drinking water if you fracture right through it? They knew they fractured directly into fresh water. This data here is not energy well data. This is on Alberta's water well database. They show here 6 shallow completions into our fresh water. And they were going to frack for CBM. They didn't tell us. I found this out. Oh, and I must say, this is not just all me. I've worked really hard for years, but there are people, I get wonderful little emails now and then. I get the odd phone call. I get a thing in the mail. Patty has sent incredible support. We met for the first time today. I didn't know about the Alberta groundwater database. I received an email. Hey, you better check this out. And I spent, 3-4 months checking as many water wells as possible, and I found that. Couldn't believe it. The one where they completed at 100 meters, they also have a document like this. Water wells began to go bad. They began investigating. These are the water wells. This is EnCana's CBM well. Here are the perforations into the water. This is EnCana's own hydrogeologist that reported this. They didn't tell us. I found this out a long time later. Oh, my water well is down the valley. And it's in the same zone as these. To this day, as Elaine said, we do not know what chemicals were injected in any of the wells. None of them above the basic groundwater protection, not the ones directly into the water. How can you do an investigation if you don't know? Pavilion, Wyoming, and EnCana's in big trouble now with the EPA. They don't know all the chemicals there either, and the EPA is investigating that. At the time, EnCana was working in Colorado. You don't have to read the whole thing, just the red. Failure to prevent the contamination of fresh water by gas. They contaminated a creek with methane and benzene. EnCana racked up record fines for this. In fact, down there, EnCana got most of the violations. Out of 34, they had 71%, and they'd only been there 3 years. And 7 years of data. They'd only been there half the time, they got 3/4 of the fines. Back at Rosebud, the seals, the cement seals they talk about that protects us. Well, when they fracked into the drinking water, they began producing all kinds of fresh water, which they weren't allowed to do without a license under the Water Act. I've FOIP'd for this data. I've searched it for the whole community. There is none. Why? Well, if you apply for a permit under the Water Act, you have to consult. You have to tell the people why. You have to take out ads in the paper. Who would want to tell a community this? Well, when they tried to fix the fresh water, pressure cracked the remedial cement. Think of what pressure does when they're fracking. So they couldn't even fix the mess that they had created. EnCana investigates itself and says we're innocent. They blamed our local water well driller. So did Alberta Environment. He was so furious, he resigned, because he was doing a lot of pre-drilling water tests for EnCana. I saw him at a public meeting. I thought he was going to explode. He was so angry. I have to divert a little bit to tell sort of an important part of the story. In 2004, I was working for EnCana up north, doing consultation work for them. And members in my community came to me and said, Jess, we need your help. There's an EnCana landman lying to us using 50-style tricks that had when people had been fighting for years to get landmen to stop these tricks, trying to get this one-page inappropriate document signed. Will you help us? Yes, okay. So I looked at it. It violated Guide 56. There was an EnCana land manager on there. I called him up. I said, I work for you up north as a contractor. You guys are scaring my community. Why don't you come consult? Albertans are the most accommodating people in the world, I think, to oil and gas. Tell them what you're doing. I'm sure everybody will be fine. Tell them how you're going to mitigate whatever it is you're doing. And he says to me, no, if we can, if we can get them all to sign this document, we don't have to consult. I said, what? That's required. I'm working for you doing this up north. So we have a good discussion. He finally agrees to tell me, to hold an open house. The next week, the landowners and the neighbors come back and say, Jess, you're lousy at your job. The same landman's back with the same piece of paper and the same rotten lies. Some of the lies were, well, you better sign because your neighbor signed. And then you find out over coffee that no, you hadn't signed. That's 50 style. So they were trying to get blanket approval. The NEB that year had put out that industry needed blanket approval to be able to do the unconventional drilling, which our regulator has now just given in a bulletin. I went for a long walk with my dogs, and I knew I was walking into hell, probably never to come out. How could I ethically keep working for a company, consulting with people, when the company is lying to my community? I resigned in writing. The noise is getting worse. Lots of compressors come with this type of development, lots of drilling, fracking. And Canada does 2 non-compliant noise studies, and our regulator does what I call suck and blow at the same time methodology. Can you try? They started Alberta Synergy, I believe, for the unconventionals and the fracking. Do you have Synergy here? When I was talking down east, I couldn't believe it because I talked about Synergy in a workshop, just specifically on Synergy, warning the people there, don't do Synergy. Don't take the poisoned apple. When the witch comes and says, hey, bite this. Oh, it's a nice apple. You have this apple. And it'll put you to sleep for years. What they were doing with the unconventional gas is all the communities that had concerned, intelligent, outspoken, courageous citizens, they went to them, fed their egos, and said, ooh, we're going to get you to help us, the industry and regulators, create best practices. And they use years of your time. They pay you, but they wear you out and keep you quiet. They also make people who are synergized sign confidentiality agreements. So in some of these meetings, I have industry insiders told me later, Jess, they knew they were diverting fresh water. They knew they were fracking into water. But because everyone signed confidentiality agreements, nobody spoke. I would have broken the damn thing. I would have told the public, they're already fracking. They said they're not going to allow in Alberta what happened in America. Well, that's what Synergy is, though. You keep all the best really busy and the educated, and in the meantime, the companies drill and frack and drill and frack and drill and frack to set precedent. In this meeting, I got the minutes. Our Alberta Environment Deputy Minister, in writing, said, it appears some of the companies were not familiar with the requirements. Water Act. What a polite way to say they were breaking the law. No, the government knew. So finally, EnCana holds an open house in my community, I think because I had resigned, and they told the same story. We will only ever perf and frack way below where your drinking water comes from. They already had perforated and fractured directly into our water. And by this time, they had already done how many experiments above the basic groundwater protection? I didn't know. And will be below all the impermeable layers. The gas will not migrate. They are fracking the impermeable layers. And then they promised, they didn't give, they promised the Rosebud Dinner Theatre, which is a tiny part of the community, $150,000, which is the purpose of, not to be generous, I don't believe, it's to divide and conquer. And to buy the silence.
That was the, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, that was the thing on the TV, the documentary.
About the road, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
one where they were showing the community.
Yeah, and they were laughing in the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Well, and you see, that's the purpose, right? And the money, I'm the enemy. I didn't frack the community's drinking water supplies, but I'm the enemy. I'm hated for doing what I'm doing.
But who was that did that documentary? Was it Fifth Estate or something? Or
CBC.
CBC, but
Yeah.
were they fair in how they presented it? Because they seem to present both sides, but
I would
wasn't
prefer...
that called 916 or something?
No, but I'd prefer not to talk about that documentary.
Okay.
If we're going to talk about a documentary, I think a much more truthful story is Gasland.
Okay.
Even though that's American, yeah, we can talk about that more in the Q&A. There's part of that controlled, I don't know how to explain it. I'm really glad the documentary's out there because it's...
It woke some of us.
Oh, yeah, and it's informative. Yes, absolutely. It's very important. Yeah. Okay. So, they've now set... That's the poisoned apple. Would you like my poisoned apple? $150,000. Lucky you. 2004. 2005, a couple months later, the Rosebud Water Tower blows up in an explosion. Did you hear about this in the Globe and Mail, on the TV, in that documentary?
No.
Well, was it being controlled? I just found this quote. Again, when I came home from New York, then I was invited to go to the East Coast. I'm always digging and researching. I'm also a Taurus, so I don't let go of stuff. And they told us a propane torch was to blame. And I get goosebumps. I believed them. Well, I found a lot of the rural papers are digitizing and archiving their old stories, which is fantastic. And I found this quote, investigators say an accumulation of gases appears to have caused the January 11 explosion. If it was a propane torch, they would have said propane. Destroyed the water reservoir. Our water worker was seriously injured. The concrete hit him in the face. There were pieces blown an incredible distance. This is a dangerous contaminant. We're not just talking about drinking something that might give you cancer 20 years down the road. You can die the way they died in just outside Hutchinson, Kansas. There have been numerous investigations in PA, Pennsylvania, and grandparents and their grandson were killed from industries migrating gas. There's been numerous injuries. One person was lighting a candle to have a bath. How many of you ever have a candle with a bath? Killed the person. Industry gas. They found, I believe it was 3 or 4, if not 5 cases of fracking causing migrating gas, even though they say there's never been a documented case. There's the old water tower there. Now, they promised Rosebud Dinner Theater, not everyone. They didn't promise me, just the dinner theater, because that's the divide and conquer thing. Not much fun. I love apples, but not poisoned apples. And this is the new water reservoir. It's underground. This cost the community just about $700,000. They paid for it. They're still paying for it. They'll be paying for it a long time. But they can't do the math because the poisoned apple puts you to sleep. You don't see the $700,000. You just see the $150,000 that you haven't even got yet. Just a few photos for a brain break. Hauling surface water untreated. When they do this, they can introduce bacteria from their drilling to contaminate aquifers. There's research that's proven this. Unprecedented drilling. These guys were just 400 meters apart. Their homes. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's just in a little area. There's more now. My water dramatically changed. I didn't know why. I thought it was premenopause. I thought it was my plumbing. Whistling taps, sounding like a train coming. So bad so it drove me crazy in the house, and stupidly, I figured out by sort of cranking the taps a bit or lifting the spout for the shower, putting a hairpin, like the big flat hairpins, it would let the gas just vent out, but I didn't know what I was doing. Stop the whistling. But I was living in an incredible explosive risk. It was pure gas, methane and ethane blowing into my home. I didn't know. They didn't tell any of us. So I lived with this, started getting incredibly bad burns, phenomenal damage to my face, irritated eyes, doing dish. I began noticing behavior changes. I used to be very clean and tidy, and I quit doing the dishes. But it took me a while to figure out, oh, yeah, I started developing these really deep cracks in my hands, and they hurt so bad. Who wants to do dishes if you get negative feedback, right? But I didn't connect. In Canada, we think we have unlimited safe water. That's what I believed. I've worked in Europe where they didn't have a lot of water, very expensive. I worked on farms. You got to bathe once a week. Here, I thought, wow, we have it all here. But it kept me in my own denial. Soaps, shampoos that had beautiful soft water, suddenly no more suds. I kept adding more and more soap. What's going on? Didn't change the soap. Because when you have really soft water, soap lasts forever. I began to notice too, the toilet seat would often be wet. Jeez, it's not even raining. Alberta's really dry. I'd run a bath. The edge of the tub would be wet. The floor would be wet. I think, but it's so dry. Where's this water coming from? And it wasn't again till later on I realized as I saw the gas spurting out of the toilet, like the well in Hutchinson, it was spurting water out of the toilet every time you flushed, so much so that the seat would stay wet for a while. I didn't connect any of it until one day, because I believed the lies. They were doing big meetings with ministers, our politicians enabling this. Instead of telling us the truth and saying, we're running out, now we have to put your water at risk. What do you think of this? Right? We didn't get any part of this conversation. I couldn't even, had I known that they had fracked our drinking water aquifer, I'd have gone, oh yeah, my water's contaminated. But it wasn't until I poured fresh water for my dogs one day and they backed up in revulsion. And it hit me, they're lying. Oh no. They've started CBM here. They had told us it hadn't even started. There's my water after fracking. Some of the industry colleagues who worked on some of those gas migration research papers said, ooh, you have a big problem like we've never seen before. You better get it tested. So I did. Did it myself. The noise continues. The ERCB deregulates the noise regulations to allow 5 decibels more noise to match EnCana's non-compliance at my place. I could spend a whole hour just talking about noise. I'm not going to. We're here about water today, but it's part of the story. So I had started already a while ago sending out information. Information is power. I was told when I was a young kid, you can't go to school, you're a girl. So it did something to me. It made me study. I will probably study to the moment I die. And I consider it an incredible gift to be able to learn and study what I want to study, not what Harper tells me I have to study. So I wrote off an email. I specified all the sections in the directive, because I'm a scientist. I studied what they had done, warned some citizen, hit send, grabbed my suitcase, because the First Nations in the Yukon had said, hey, Jess, will you come tell us about CBM? I was up there for a week, exhausted, drove this everywhere, meetings everywhere, came home to a letter from the regulator, I am banished. I'm banished from energy regulation. This is Canada. I look at this letter, I go, huh? My neighbor was with me, and she got scared. She said, what if they throw you in jail? I said, well, you'll have to take care of my dogs and bring me my laptop. Yeah, right. I said, and I got angry. But I worked in the patch. I'm educated. I'm a scientist. I'm an Albertan. Albertans don't speak out. I'm speaking out. Ooh, this was bad news. Shut her up. They did this, I believe, to do what had happened to my neighbor, scare me into obedient silence. They picked the wrong girl, because I'm a Taurus. I looked at that and I went, ooh, they're hiding something. What are they hiding? I didn't know yet. What are they hiding? Here's the letter. They considered me a threat to the public. You're all in danger, even though I didn't bring my water with me. And they considered me a danger to the regulator. They said they were going to have a review with the Attorney General, and I would find out about this. I never did. I read this letter and I thought, seems to be a violation of my Charter of Rights. Seems to be a lot of things. So I'm going to write some questions, and I did. And I wrote a letter asking clarification, like, under what legislation can you judge a citizen guilty without a trial, without evidence? They refused my mail. That's how serious they took my banishment. It came back, refused by addressee, stamped. The ERCB's address is under there. And the amazing thing is, in the Yukon, I had been interviewed, and I had some, I guess, pretty incredible quotes in some papers. And a journalist at the Edmonton Journal contacted me because she wanted to interview me about this. It wasn't about the water, it was about that. So I said, yeah, boy, and do I have some stuff to tell you. So she came down, did an interview at the kitchen table. This was just a few days before this came back. My water results had come. And I'd been studying now methane migration, and I knew from the CAP study that 1 milligram per liter was dangerous, and I had like thousands of times, not thousands, 30 times more than that. So I showed her the data, and the same day this was in my mailbox, this was on the front page of the Edmonton Journal. So I now have contaminated, dangerous water and no regulator. That's why I believe laws and regulations will not protect you from fracking. But they don't like bad PR. They don't like bad press. So they came out with this fancy little directive that really doesn't do much because they're still fracking above the basic groundwater protection. And in this document that vanished off their website after I went public with it, they said industry had some of their shallow fracks damage neighboring oil field wells. So their frack fluids were shooting out and damaging, oh no, but water wells, it'll never happen to a water well, and no water well was damaged, which may be true. The aquifer, the groundwater, that's another story. And they also said there may not be a complete understanding of fracture propagation at shallow depths. Manitoba already said in 1989 they were propagating into water. They didn't know what they were doing. There's the directive. It's got some really good language. They changed it really well and took it off the net. And one of the things I've learned in this frack war is I save everything I find. because as soon as I go public with it, the good stuff vanishes. The Research Council reports from 2003 that said natural methane from coals in Alberta is rare. That got pulled off the internet too. So fracking not permitted at those shallow depths. A little late. We were promised safe and alternate water now and into the future, regardless of whether the methane was from natural flow or not. It's all natural, but what's not natural are the holes. They knew they had screwed up. Government finally comes to do something. Finally, a little late. They didn't even know how to test for methane in water. They had a trainee who had never done it before. They were alarmed by the level of gas in my water and the drop in static water. That's another impact. When you get contaminated water, that's one thing. Somebody at Cochrane just lost their water completely. I'm afraid that that might have been silenced because suddenly the person has gone quiet. And they told me that I was to blame for the methane because I don't have cattle and I don't use enough water, and they hadn't even analyzed the data yet. 3 days later, we have an emergency meeting with the government, and they tell us that we are to blame because we use too much water. Me and 2 little dogs. The people did a tour. When they saw me on the front page, I wasn't supposed to be part of this tour. I don't like speaking in public. I'm a very private person. This is really hard for me. They said, Jess, please, 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 please. We had Americans come up. I said, okay. We did a tour for the people by the people. You may not believe it. And many people laugh at me and argue with me, but I have learned I'm incredibly powerful. And I'm ordinary. We are really powerful. And they don't like it. And they are afraid of it. I really believe that. That's why so many lies and secrets. This was a tour by the people, for the people. The energy regulator was telling the press they put it on. And guess what happens? Baseline testing a month later. I bet had that tour not happened, there would still be no testing. It's a start. It's not great. They don't test for dissolved methane. Now remember all that historic data I told you about? That was dissolved methane data. And they said, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers said, it's a good indicator of water is used in the region to test for dissolved methane. They only test the free gas. You can't quantify it. So really it's protecting industry, but it is a start. Because they're fingerprinting, at least they're fingerprinting the gases in the water. Some landowners have offered to EnCana that they would pay for the test when EnCana comes to test their well. If they would do dissolved methane's only $100 with GST, and EnCana refuses. Why? Because it's vital data. Yeah, it's my opinion. At this same time, the government knew they had done fingerprinting on 3 water wells at Rosebud and 1 of EnCana's shallow gas wells. 1. But none of the ones that were above 200 meters. All the guilty wells they ignored. And the data says that the fingerprints of the ethane, propane, and butane in the water and the gases in the water indicate match to EnCana's shallow wells. Later on, when they came to do a review, I'm probably going to forget to tell you this later, they ignored all this data in their final review and went over 100 miles away to wells that were fracked much deeper to say there was no connection. Some of the chemicals, I'm not going to go through them all. In the hamlet of Rosebud, they did find hexavalent chromium, which is a known carcinogen, as well as indicators of petroleum distillates, which they use for fracking. Did they tell anyone? No. My water, evidence of petroleum distillates. EnCana has publicly admitted they were using the same gel to frack fluids in Alberta as they were in America. There they used diesel to frack. Chromium increased in my water by a factor of 45 from the before tests to after fracking. And the last 2, the tert-butyl alcohol and the phthalates in my water, are some of the same contaminants the EPA found in contaminated water wells at Pavilion, Wyoming. This is the Bruce Jack water well. Did you guys hear about this in the news? Look like the Hutchison water well? Can't really see it. Oh, it's too dark. This is water shooting, gas is shooting the water up to here. Here's the well. He was told by the government to vent his gas out of his water well, which he did. He got it professionally vented. So you can just see the water there. Finally, industry sent 2 water well testers. A couple days later, they were getting out of their truck. Bruce went to turn the well on, and the switch ignited the gas. All 3 men seriously injured in the hospital. This should be front page news. Briefing note. The Alberta Research Council, Gerard Proddy, VP, was appointed later on. Meeting the priorities of industry is what their website said. In a briefing note that I found from Freedom of Information legislation, I've spent over $4,000 on trying to get investigation data, trying to get to the truth. Most of the data I'm still not getting. It's currently an inquiry. I find that the Information Commissioner in Edmonton is enabling the lies and the cover-up, in my experience. But in this, I did find, I got piles of data, and I found a few good bits in there. They were going to blame bacteria before they even got retained to review the investigations. And a quote in one of the documents in this briefing note that was sent to Minister of Environment in Ontario and Edmonton, I don't know why. Landowners may not willingly accept this determination by Alberta Environment and the Research Council. I somehow don't think it was their determination. I somehow think it was industry saying, you blame nature. Back to my banishment. It's part of the story. What happens when you're fracked? I still wanted to know, why did you guys do this to me? And an ERCB lawyer interrogated me, McCarthy-like style, for over 2 hours. It was an absolutely hideous experience. The most terrifying thing I've ever been through as an adult. It was awful. Trying to get evidence after the fact, 6 months later. You have bombs. No, I have no bombs, but there's a bomb in my barn. My water well is a bomb. No, I haven't broken the law. No. All the things he was trying to get me to admit. A little while later, they knew the data indicated the gas contamination in our water was from EnCana. They refused us comprehensive investigating. They refused safety protocol. We said our water is dangerous. We know it's dangerous. They refused a sampling protocol, but they allowed EnCana to drill and frack where the company had perforated and fractured our drinking water aquifers, which was just over here, towards the, over here. This is about a mile from my place. I was going to run errands and I couldn't believe it. This was fracked above the basic groundwater protection during a serious community-wide, my well's not the only one, drinking water contamination case. September, this is an international problem. Second Wellbore Integrity Network meeting's first key conclusion. There is clearly a problem with wellbore integrity worldwide. That's those seals they promise us. There's the cover. The EUB, after I went public, said, oh, all water wells in coal are contaminated with methane. In 2006, they said there was 906 water wells that had methane in them. There's 24,000 water wells. There's over 24,000 water wells in coal, over 500,000 water wells in the province. It's a pretty low percentage. That's not all. And they did their own study, and 90% of the water wells in coal showed no detectable methane or ethane. Here's my water. I don't do that in the house anymore. It scared me so much I'm a blur because I jumped. Do you remember the Lindbergh research by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, CAP? 19.1 was the highest level of methane they found in the water near the leaking energy wells. We have 30 to 66. In that report, they also said 1 milligram is a risk of explosion if the water passes a confined space, like a water tower, water tank, or like Bruce Jack's situation. They've also done a study. They think now, because of the government's really shoddy sampling, we might actually have 3 times that. Things happen. This is in my community. The regulator did a review, and EnCana did a public announcement on this. They said the rig had hit some kind of an anomaly and came to rest on the trailer. That doesn't look like resting to me. The regulator said EnCana had lost circulation, which is a blowout underground. where they lose drilling fluid into formation at about 80 meters where the community gets their drinking water from. They haven't done any monitoring of the water wells near there.
Still resting, I see.
It's resting, taking a break. One man went to hospital with shock, so it was a nice rest. 2007, finally they agreed to comprehensive investigating, but they changed labs halfway through. The lab detected ethane, did not fingerprint it. They knew the ethane indicated a match. Instead, they went to gas wells. They won't even disclose the company or the data to me under freedom of information. They're breaking the law. It's public information, claiming no match. Over 100 miles away. Why would you avoid the ethane fingerprints? They break their promise, and then they drill some monitoring wells too. Remember, the Council of our environmental minister said in 2002, we have a problem. This is many years too late. Here's one of them there. Can you see that? This is a water well. This is the lid. There was so much methane and ethane blowing out of this water well. This lid should be closed. And it was blowing the lid like this. I drove by to have a look and called a colleague. They didn't even find any water in that well. And he said, back up, Jess. Don't shoot up any gravel or make a spark. That could blow. They went home Friday night. They didn't even put flagging tape. They didn't even give a methane detector to our volunteer fire department. They had to call EnCana. EnCana came, pure methane and ethane blowing out of that well. Similar to my water taps blowing gas in my house. Oh, at this time, the government had started to supply fresh water, so I wasn't living with the gas anymore, blowing in my house. We got told off by the community for daring to put at risk the $150,000 promise. Now, one of the houses, this is the well that had the lid blowing open. They've now sealed it. This is the well where they think that we've got 3 times. This is a swing set of a house with toddlers. This is a county trail. Kids dirt biked, quadded, and they didn't put any warning up. That could have blown. They also found the known carcinogen hexavalent chromium. They told nobody. I obtained this by freedom of information. Rosenberg, prestigious international water forum on water policy, said our groundwater policies are inadequate. Lack of comprehensive monitoring systems. No kidding. It's all to enable industry. But this quote I found the most fascinating. A monitoring network is the last line of defense against contamination by industries that are essential to the economic future of the province. Water is important. We use it for everything. So not only are we putting our water at risk, we're putting our economic future at risk. Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers testified to a committee in Ottawa, so did I. And he said that if they find methane in water from their baseline testing, they presume it's natural. That's some science. This is an industry presentation, 2006-2007. They did a peer-reviewed report out of this. It's EUB, their logo at the top. Now we have a little bit more understanding of why the biogenic methane is leaking up the wellbores. They've actually used research to find the deep production zones, the thermogenic zones, have less chance of gas migrating up the well. Where the swamp gas is that they're using to discredit Josh Fox in his Gasland movie, and mine, and my community, and Pinoca, and Rockyford, and Wetaskiwin, there's so many. They've got higher potential of the biogenic gas leaking. This is industry. This is the regulator using industry's data saying this. Now we see many more ways of the gas to migrate through the cement, between the cement and steel, between cement and formation. If the cement doesn't seal properly before they come in perf and frack, they'll create little channels. And as soon as the gas starts to migrate, it creates a beautiful little channel. That's why they say difficult to completely stop. You don't have to read the whole slide. The big new fracks, the multi-stage with the horizontal drilling, the deep wells, they're going to do them shallow too. That's a deviated well. Take a look at this. This is Regulator. Major impact of gas leakage, well deviation. They can't get a proper seal down there, or on angle wells either, because the cement slumps. And they just can't. How can you do that a mile down? So they know this is a major factor. The noise continues. EnCana has a straw bale wall that rots every once in a while, falls over. They put up a new wall. Their noise consultant told me it just makes the noise go over top. It doesn't really work. This is a page out of the Research Council's annual report, 2006-2007. This is Dr. Blythe here. He was retained to review the Alberta environment's incomplete and very shoddy investigations into the water contamination. Now in this report, where the yellow is, it says this. Understanding Alberta's water resources. Funding for this research comes from Alberta Environment and EnCana. How can you now review an investigation done by Alberta Environment into contamination in an EnCana frac field? That's conflict of interest. Big time. When I went public with that whole annual report got removed off the internet. And they completely revamped a whole new one and merged it with the next year and took out that damning statement. And their report stood. It's not peer-reviewed. And this is what they said. They dismissed the contamination as natural, said what they were going to do in 2006, suggested bacteria to blame. You dirty water well owners. Ethane don't make propane, butane. Ethane don't. Bacteria don't make ethane, propane, butane, or hexavalent and chromium, or petroleum distillates. They just ignored all those. They ignored the damning fingerprints. They used data from over 100 miles away. They used anecdotal, unsubstantiated stories of water in other water wells, so all our water wells were contaminated with methane. They ignored the historic records that were included in the appendices of their reports. So is it natural the government retained some experts and they put out a report on the report saying gas migration due to natural pathways is unlikely to occur? But the Research Council just said that's where all the contaminated water is coming from. They take away the water. They say our water is safe. Because I'm not working anymore, I needed a truck for my career. I had to buy a new vehicle. I wanted to get a car. I have to haul my own water. I'm an independent person. It's very expensive to get it delivered. It's my little dog Magic. He always comes to help. There's the new water tower. I have to look at it from my property. And then to add insult to the injury, the company denies that they can do fracks above 200 meters. In the press, I wrote the company asking for questions on their wanting to drill even more. And an EnCana lawyer wrote me back, your comment on numerous gas wells, or the direct quote was, my comment, numerous gas wells that have been completed above 200 meters is inaccurate. They didn't investigate any of those. In the report on my case, they didn't even admit that EnCana had fractured the aquifer that supplies my well. Whoop. I always forget that this map takes a long time to load. The red solid circles, that's my water well. I gathered all this data. It took me over a year. This should be done by the regulator, not an ordinary citizen. I don't get paid for this. I've been studying this now for 7-8 years. These were fractured above 200 meters, and the circles above the basic groundwater protection. In Colorado, another study, increasing methane in groundwater, coincident with increasing number of gas wells. National News aired a segment on my water, and the very next week, guess who shows up? It's very beautiful where I live. No, it wasn't the ERCB or EnCana or the Premier. They sent the RCMP. Well,
the National did a
W5 did a story on my water as well as other landowners, and I talked about the ERCB's terrible treatment of me, the interrogation. Did you see that? Yeah. Well, Monday, that was on Saturday night. Monday morning, this officer here began, the big guy phoned me. Hello, this is Constable blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, I started laughing. He said, this is very serious. How dare you laugh? I said, well, you're phoning me right after national news aired a segment on my show. It's like interesting timing. What are you talking about? I said, didn't you see the show? You should see the show. You should read Andrew's book, Saboteurs, too, because you guys in Gwyn Morgan blew up one of EnCana's own gas wells to try to frame somebody. So my lawyers and I talked with them and said, we will come to you. They wanted to come to me. I said, no, this is intimidation. I live alone. I'm a middle-aged woman with 2 little dogs. I do not want strange men in my home. No. And we will come to you. My lawyers will come. They came, unannounced, on Thursday. I was terrified, because they could have come and taken all my files under Harper's new Terrorist Act. I don't care about me. I care about the files. And when they got this close, the big guy says, oh, you can't take pictures of us. We're undercover. And I think we should all tell Harper that he needs to give his RCMP white fuzzies for wintertime surveillance. It was sheer and simple. It was just to scare me. They don't like bad press.
They don't like women either.
No, they don't. Not in Alberta. And not in Canada now.
With RCMP, so.
Pardon?
One is a woman.
No, they're both men.
No,
Oh, it looks like
curly hair.
Yeah.
Unisex.
So would they do this if the contamination in my water was natural? Would they attack Josh Fox and his Academy nominating documentary if those cases were natural contamination? I'm sorry, it's a long story. I live it. I'm still living it.
Are you still afraid?
I'm always afraid. Yeah, I know how powerful I am, but since I began uncovering every step of the thing that has been building, they've changed me. I'm not fun anymore. My friends have lost me. I don't want to visit. I don't want to do social things. I find it hard to laugh. I used to have... Pardon?
You better move here.
Yeah, well, I can't. I have to finish what I'm doing. Because water's too important. I have to. I don't want to. It must be done. But yeah, I told the people in New York, I said, I can't believe you're giving me this award, but you picked the wrong woman, because I'm always afraid. And halfway through my presentation there, the silly people, they gave me the award with this unbelievable speech. If I ever catch up my legal case website, which is, the speech will be posted there, but they had me in tears. And then they gave me the microphone and said, okay, your turn now, do the presentation. And it was pretty hard. But so halfway through, all of a sudden I stopped and said, every morning, I don't want to get up. Every single morning, I do not want to get up. I do not want this life. And then I get up and I tell myself, keep going. And the people at the church center at the United Nations, they just jumped up, roaring and clapping. And I mean, you just have to keep going. And I will not back down. Doesn't mean... But I'm also not going to lie and say that I'm not afraid. I'm very afraid. That's one of the nastiest companies in the world. They're punitive in Canada. They're nasty. And the Alberta government? What kind of a government? What? They're nasty. They are nasty. And Albertans are nasty for continuing to vote for them such huge majorities. I live afraid in my own community. I come to Saskatchewan to rest. Now I'm admitting on tape. I come here to hide for a few months, sometimes only a few weeks, just to get away from that fear. And it is a huge bubble that's about to burst.
And they're coming to Saskatchewan too, though.
Oh yeah, they want to frack the shales here. They are fracking shallow at Davidson. There's already contaminated water. They're fracking in New Brunswick. There's already contaminated water. They want to frack Ottawa. So Harper better get ready. He better start calling me up for information. They want to frack Toronto, Waterloo, the whole southwestern foot of Ontario. Manitoba. Vancouver Island, they're fracking at Campbell River. We're out of the good stuff.
How much money do they need? I mean,
It's never enough. See, it's not my fault that this is going on, because National Energy Board, let's finish this thing. 2009, they can only get 20% of the fractured gas. Do the math. Now we have shattered formations underground that nobody can go fix. You can't crazy glue this. Nobody knows what these chemicals are going to do. Nobody has studied the combinations of the chemicals in the drilling muds and servicing chemicals. They are sometimes more toxic than the frack chemicals. Nobody's studied what they do in combination. 80%. What's going to happen to that gas over time? That's not me with that data. That's the National Energy Board. Well, PR, they don't like bad PR. This story, I have never in my life of big oil ever seen a story go wild in the press. All over the world. This is probably going to be, as negative as it is, one of the most positive things for communities and people globally. Because it is so terrible. And because people are speaking out loudly with rage everywhere except Alberta. Well, mind you, I got to take that back. You'll see soon. So Talisman Terry comes up with coloring book for your children. I don't have any. BC, Oil and Gas Commission, they come out with a safety advisory. Do you remember the directive in 2006 that the regulator took off their website because of those damning statements? Same thing. But now they're saying they don't know what their deep fracks do. Fracture propagation. They don't know. Well, these are brute force operations. They're experiments. I dig for data. Suddenly one day, I was pretty depressed. I have had a lot of deaths of loved ones in recent years that I really regret my time digging on this stuff because I can never get that time back. They're gone. So I was pretty down and I was looking through the Alberta water well database. The historic records that I had found were gone. Worse, they altered them. There's the record I showed you at the beginning on my water well. There's the new one. Doesn't say gas present, no. They put 2 pages to sort of cover up all kinds of stuff, make it look really good. Here's where they talk about gas in water. They didn't say gas present, no. That's tampering with data. Like that, I'm really annoying to my friends at how I keep records and study all the time instead of go have fun. What are the landowners going to do that don't keep track of their records? U.S. Congress investigates Canada's fracking and all the allegations of water contamination. Oh, and look at this. I read in the local paper. They finally gave them money. That's 2010. They promised it in 2004. What a way to control a contaminated community. They're brilliant. Well, it's very smart. It's very smart. But they doubled the money and added another 50,000. And I thought to myself, there's going to be bad press. Why would they double the money when they don't have to? EPA tells Pavilion, Wyoming, don't drink the water. That's an EnCana frack field. EnCana agreed to provide water. They're not giving me water. Very briefly, the highest methane level they found at Pavilion was 808 micrograms per liter. Micrograms, not milligrams. At Rosebud, look at what we have. 26 to 66,000. That's a heck of a lot more. This one's interesting. 6 micrograms per liter, 4 miles southeast of Rosebud, on the map, where the least shallow experiments happened and where EnCana did not frack the drinking water aquifers. Testimony again, but this was in 2010. Industry even admits in testimony that shallow fracks interfered with our groundwater, but our regulators and government won't. VP with EnCana is asked in testimony, will you disclose the chemicals you inject? People are getting upset. EnCana says, oh yes, we're doing it right now. No, they're not. I've been asking for years. I've asked for it under Freedom of Information after paying thousands of dollars. I do not know what I was bathing in. The pregnant women and children do not know what they were bathing in. The MP asks EnCana to provide the chemicals. So EnCana sends a nice letter. How many MPs are chemists? I don't know any. These are not chemicals. This is a dirty, dirty, dirty trick. Formic acid is, hydrochloric acid is, trican WG111L. Never heard of that chemical? What about Nalco 657? These are product names. How are you can't find anything out from what's in your water from a product name. Have you heard of the New West Partnership? Your minister signed with ours in BC to use our tax dollars and the mainstream media to lie to us and make us believe fracking is safe. They signed that December 16, 2010. The NDP and the Alberta Federation of Labour leaked that. Tyndall Centre, prestigious, University of Manchester, significant risks. Gas wells leaking in Quebec, more than half. Talisman said, oh, it's common. Normal part of the process. He doesn't say nature did it. Deep and shallow. They've admitted it in writing. That's really scary to me. Fish scale shales in Alberta, which are the deep shales that they want to frack, are reportedly radioactive. When they drill this stuff, it has to come out and they dump it somewhere. What do they not like to do? Spend money. EnCana just got approval and they just finished drilling under my land. I'm trouble. They won't tell me what they're doing with the waste. The regulator wrote me a lovely letter and said, don't worry, EnCana will not be dumping their waste adjacent to your property. You never have control. Frack moratorium. They called for in Quebec. We should be here too.
I think New York did too now.
Parts of New York. I think New York is going to end up public pressure. I think, yeah. More and more and more communities, counties are, Inverness County Council is taking a stand, wanting much better protection. The government's very unhappy with them in Nova Scotia. Somebody asked about explosions. Because of the water impacts, some companies are suggesting using propane fracks. Well, this is a propane frack in Alberta last year. 13 injured. They shut down everything for 2 weeks to try to figure out what went wrong. In my inquiry right now, still trying to get the investigation data, the ERCB and EnCana, Petrobacan, and Schlumberger were allowed by our information commissioner to be secret participants in my inquiry. They gave out my private unlisted phone number to these secret parties. I didn't know who they were. They sent my submissions to them, even though each page of my submission says only to be disclosed to named parties. I put the heat on the commissioner's office, listed all the times they had broken their own law, and they finally released this information. This is still an inquiry. I go public last April. As Elaine said, I presented at the United Nations May 2nd, 3rd. Came home on the 7th. This study, peer-reviewed, amazing study. Now they've quantified it. 17 times more methane in water wells near drilled and fractured energy wells. People phoned me up and said, geez, Jess, did you orchestrate this study? I said, no, I didn't even know it was happening. The timing, going public with our case, United Nations, whammo. Industry has been attacking this like crazy. You don't have to read all this. What's important with this quote, European Union did a big study. High risk if they do it wrong. Possible high risk if they do it right. They want to ban fracking everywhere. France voted to penalties, imprisonment, money, fines. Oh! Talisman Terry gets his own show on the Colbert Report. And it is funny. It's on the internet. It is so funny. It's July 11. If you search July 11 for the show, it is incredibly funny. I cried too because it's my story. Not my story, but it's a parallel to my story. And it's sad, but oh man, is it funny. And it reverberated around the world, right? Look at this. Talisman does Terry in. They put him to rest. He only lived a couple of years. Poor Talisman Terry. United States Geological Survey scientists were only starting to learn. 2011. They've been doing 10 years in my community. Now, I'm almost done. I never thought I would see this in my lifetime. Where they're doing the fracks where the water well went bad and the foundation damages to those rich houses. The community's demanding a moratorium. An Alberta community. Somebody put in, this is the welcome sign. Somebody put this is their logo on their demand for the moratorium. It says, "What fresh hell is this?" from Shakespeare. And what a great way to talk about fracking, the new brute force fracking. They are demanding a moratorium. Now, we have the best regulator in the world. So what does the rest of the fracked world get? Did you hear in the news Peter Kent has said last year they're going to study fracking? Well, how many years too late is that? 10 years too late. And they're not even going to study it. They're just going to do literature review. But they're going to take 18 months. So in the meantime, drill and frack, drill and frack. Very, very deadly bulletin came out in Alberta. I bet you Premier Wall will copy it. They have removed all the limits for unconventionals in Alberta.
Removed all what?
The limits. And they're saying there will be no surface impacts because the limits are just being removed underground.
Do they frack above ground very much?
That's a really good point. May I use that quote? Thank you very much. That's a really good one. You know what's really interesting too? In Calgary, there's a Walmart and there's some Crown land. And they just announced it a little while later. I just haven't had time to update this. Well, the presentation would have gone for a week, but they're going to frack there. And they've admitted it's going to be horizontals, and they've admitted it's going to be fracking in their Q&A, private with the community. They didn't consult with the people. The ERCB let them get away with it because they said the company consulted with the community association. The community association didn't tell the people. But the Q&A says they are going to frack. And it'll probably be many, many wells. So they are fracking, they are going to frack the cities. Up until now, the people in the cities don't care what happens to the rural people. If they keep their, well, some people do, but not many. I mean, if they can keep their prosperous lives going, but now, Cowtown, big oil, Houston, Alberta, is going to be fracked. It's going to be very interesting as I watch from afar what happens there.
That's in Calgary, you say?
Yes.
They already have a fault line, they may able to go for the work.
And guess what else they have there? They've admitted this. They are fracking beneath sour gas.
How stupid can they be?
Exactly. Tony Ingraffia, he's a professor at Cornell. He's been warning the world, don't do it. It's stupid. It's stupid. Don't do it. And under sour gas, Calgary's all sour gas. They're fracking for oil. It's the tight cardium. Oil, the money. Alberta, what's going to trump? It's right near a school.
Did they worry about a herd of cattle and letting off gas?
You better go home. You better go home and have a big steak. No offense to the vegetarians. So, yeah, it's never enough. This is from EnCana, a map. Here's Rosebud. Here's my place. This is my land. Here's where they're the cover photo of the presentation, where they're drilling under my land. There's the bottom hole location. That's my water well. Above the base of, this is to be fracked above the basic groundwater protection. This one too. This one, I saw an EnCana operator pumping undisclosed fluids down a well to be fracked above the basic groundwater protection. Big tank said flammable. They're not allowed to use toxic chemicals above the basic groundwater protection. Will I ever find out what was in that tank? Oh, and I couldn't believe it that, I'll show you later. The citizens have the lousy equipment. I have the worst little digital camera that I go around and do all my stuff, right? And these guys have the best of everything. So it's never enough. I'll show you a few examples. These were all taken October, November last year. Now they've already fracked the hell out of us. Compressors, more and more and more. EnCana promised there'd never be more than 2 in a row. More and more wells. So our cemetery, can you see the cemetery? Cemetery. That's the well they're drilling under my land. We only have one cemetery in Rosebud. That's another well. That's a shallow well to be fracked above the basic groundwater protection. There it is there from a different angle. There they are drilling under my land. Again, that's the hamlet, my property. This is my property here behind the church. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. I bought it because of the beauty. There's Magic and I. It's a hard job watching these guys. Community watch and unpaid, and I'm hated. It was really hard receiving that award because I've been so used to so much abuse. And to be appreciated was really like, whoa, this is kind of foreign now. I've been in Alberta too long. I call this photo EnCana watching Jess watch EnCana. And the fellow there got pretty agitated. I was looking for chemicals with the binoculars. Like I was trying to see if I could see something. My little dog, though, was getting very nervous. There's a frack that was happening at the same time as them drilling under my land just across the highway. The cumulative effects are astronomical. Another one, saw my community. Waste pits. There's my place. There's the rig here. There's another one. That rig, they moved in the same day. So that one went, they moved around. You lose your privacy too. And there they are there. I took that from the deck of my house. So, radioactive waste dumping. Remember when the regulators said, don't worry, they're not going to do it adjacent to your land. They went half a mile over.
Someone else's land.
This is half a mile to the west of my land. I watched this truck fill up at the rig.
So is that county land that they're going to dump?
No, this is agricultural land. Have some bread. Go home, have a piece of bread with your steak and put lots of butter on it.
So that's someone else's property that they're dumping on.
Yeah, but they would have signed with this guy. He probably would have been
Sure.
paid a couple $100
Sure.
to take the waste.
Yeah.
They're told, Davidson, I have it, I saved it, a headline in the local paper at Davidson, free fertilizer for the farmers.
Oh.
Because they do use some components of fertilizers in their mixes. But they don't tell the farmers about the heavy metals, the arsenic, the chromium, the barium. They don't tell them about the waste being radioactive. This is a study by EnCana at Suffield in the National Wildlife Area. Recycled frac fluid. They were doing a test to see if they could recycle the water, which is very commendable. I applaud them for that. Drilling waste. What do we have? Arsenic. Look at the barium. That's a lot. That's milligrams per liter. Chromium. Chromium went up 45 times in my water. Mercury. An EnCana document I have says that they immediately work in when they do this. They call it land spreading or land farming when they do this to make it a little bit easier for the farmer to take the money and allow toxic waste to be dumped on his land. The EnCana document says they work it in right away to prevent adverse effects. The photographer and I were watching. It was a very windy day. It was a Sunday. The people were coming out of church. We live in a valley. There's more children in the hamlet than there are adults. You could see the wind blowing this airborne. You can't catch it in the photo. So are we breathing heavy metals? I feel lousy when I'm in Alberta. When I leave, where they're not doing this. And I went, I don't know if you can see it with this screen, the next photo. Do you see the mark? Yeah. Well, I went back to see if they were working it in. They didn't work it in. And a regulator document from 2003 states that if the rain doesn't wash it off the vegetation, and if the wind blows, it's airborne. Who wants to breathe barium? Did you hear about this? December 8, just before Christmas, the EPA released a report, draft, EnCana's frack field at Wyoming. This is going to be fascinating to watch. The final comes in April. I have never seen a company squeal like I'm seeing EnCana squeal. They've connected fracking to the toxics in the water there. They're slamming this report. They don't even pay attention to Josh Fox anymore. Now they're the Republicans want to get rid of the EPA. Oh, by the way, they're telling rural Albertans that I'm going to single-handedly destroy the oil and gas industry, as if.
Yay.
Gets better. It gets better.
I'll bring the beer.
Gets better. The Alberta Surface Rights Group is demanding a ban. This is incredible. Really, I never did I think I would see this in my lifetime. Never. That's January 4th. January 13th, did you guys hear about this frack blowout? Nobody knows what those guys are standing in. You don't know what's come from underground. This blowout, they were fracking 1.2 kilometers away. 1.2 kilometers. And the frack connected to the formation of this abandoned well. I don't think it was operating at the time. A worker came home, saw the stuff shooting out of the well, and he's a good citizen, community watch. He phones the ERCB emergency response line. Gets no answer. He had to call the Surface Rights Group for help. He had to go to the frack crew, find them, tell them to shut it down. As soon as they shut it down, the fluid stopped shooting out of the well. The regulator released a report. They've had 5 such incidences since 2008 from deep formations. They didn't talk from deep horizontal. They didn't talk about the vertical frackouts or the shallow frackouts. One was just over 1.6 kilometers away, and the worst scary part is that it connected almost 500 meters. So exactly what the U.S. Geological Survey said. We're just beginning to study this. We're just beginning to learn. And the CEO in Britain, you can't control these things. They sure can't. Worst, those poor workers, they're not going to know what toxic chemicals they're in. A couple days later, Cenovus, EnCana, Drumheller. Drumheller also has contaminated water. $250,000 to the library in exchange for naming rights on the youth, children, and community program rooms. Talisman Terry, coloring book. The Surface Rights Group then wrote a letter. This is incredible. If groups around the country do this, they're doing it like crazy down east. Quebec, whoa, the rage is building in Quebec. Hundreds of confidentiality agreements, money. I think they're wrong. I wrote our regulator years ago, before I even knew what had happened to my water. They have to be made illegal. And in my legal case, one of the reasons I'm walking in hell for a long time, is because I refuse to give up my freedom of speech and sharing my research with people like you. Because there is no money, to me, $1 billion doesn't pay for our right to speak. There is no money in the world. And I will not let this data be sealed if I ever get it. So laws and regulations. This is what I told you today in a very long story. They do not protect us. Alberta has the best. And you've seen what Alberta got. So, that's the river on my land. It's a global issue. If you have any energy left, we can brainstorm. What can we do? Because it's we. It's all of us. Water moves. Thanks.